Harshdeep, go for it.
Okay. Thank you everyone who joined us for our previous webinars. Today we have our third webinar of the series. Today, Professor M. Balakrishnan from IIT Delhi is joining us for webinar on AssisTech Lab. He has done his BS from BITS Pilani in 1977, followed by he has done his PhD in electrical department from IIT Delhi in 1984. His research areas include assistive technologies, embedded systems, EDA and system level designing, FPGA architecture, and tools. He won many awards, but some of them are national awards by DST in 2018 and 2016 for his work on refreshable Braille Display and onboard. He also won Manhattan Award, which is given in the South Asia for best use of ICT for the development and for his work on Smart Cane. He also won National Award by Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment in 2015 for his work on Smart Cane. He has more than 30 plus journals, 100 plus conference publications, 2 books and 1 chapter, 7 patents. He has 30 plus sponsored projects. Some of them are running right now. In the past, he has 15 PhD students, 5 MSR, 120 MTech students, 80 plus BTech students. So these are some of the brief overview of Professor M. Balakrishnan. Now, I would like to invite Professor M. Balakrishnan to deliver a presentation on AssisTech Lab, where he will talk about what is AssisTech Lab, what they have done in the AssisTech, and what is the future plans.
Before we get started, a small thing. So Professor M. Balakrishnan will be using a presentation that those of you who are sighted should be able to see it on the screen. For those who are blind, can go to inclusivestem.org/webinar3.pptx and can follow along simultaneously. That's inclusivestem.org/webinar3.pptx. Over to you, sir.
Sir, you will need to unmute yourself.
Let me see if I can. One sec.
Yes, so first of all, thanks for inviting me to give this webinar. So I would, in the next 40 minutes or so, I will try to present the work that we have been doing in the space of AssisTech. Of course, it's a joint activity where there are a lot of students involved, there are a lot of research staff involved, and also my faculty colleagues and collaborators are involved. I will talk a little bit about that at the end of my talk. Broadly, we classify the objective of AssisTech to be finding technology solutions for the mobility and education of the visually impaired. Technology part becomes important because we are located in an Institute of Technology, and our objectives is also to see whether the technology can impact people's lives, and in this case, people's lives of visually impaired. So, slides are not moving. Okay, I'm not able to move the slides. Let me just check what is the problem.
It should be.
Stop sharing. So let me just do that. Previously, it was working fine, but
You just need to share your screen. And
now it's okay. So is that okay? Now I had shared the screen, so this was.
But now it is.
Now
off.
it's not shared. Yeah, so I will share it again. So something.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's shared again.
Yeah, it's active now.
Okay, so yeah, now it's more. Yeah, so the key challenge is that we look upon it, and of course, for this community, I don't have to spend much time on motivation because you're all familiar with the needs of the visually impaired. So in terms of the challenge, we look at two different challenges. One is on independent mobility and education. As in AssisTech's philosophy, these are the two very critical requirements for societal inclusion, because independent mobility gives people a mobility not only for the purpose of social interaction, but for education, for vocation, and that becomes extremely important for a very large section of the society which cannot have assistance all the time, assistance through a human being. So they need that mobility to be able to even survive. Education, of course, is extremely important in today's world, and almost any type of jobs are not possible without education. So these are the two clearly the needs. So around 12 to 13 years back, when actually first I started working in this field, I was completely unaware of the requirements or what the tools and technology that people use in this space. So it has all been a learning experience. And a lot of this learning has happened through our collaborators. Especially I'm very grateful to Mr. Dipendra Manocha, who has played a very critical role in my awareness of what the challenges and what type of even solutions are likely to work. So one of the things that we realized was what the role of a white cane in terms of the mobility. And earlier, of course, we have seen people with visual impairment, blind people walking with white cane. But what and all it can do, wonderful things it can do if a person is well trained, is something I became aware. But the problem that got posed to us, and this was clearly, we were very novices at the time in this particular field, and everything, all inputs came from users. So the problem that was posed to us was detecting obstacles which do not have a direct footprint on the walking path, but actually projects onto your upper body, becomes very dangerous. So here we do have a picture of a tree which has fallen down, but one of the branches is projecting, and it could actually hit the person in the upper part, because the cane, the way that the cane is used, it is only good to detect obstacles below the level of knee. Later on only we realized that why this particular problem remains unsolved, at least not solved very satisfactorily, is primarily because these type of obstacles are very unlikely to occur in developed countries, in high income countries, where the footpaths and things are kept clear, corridors are kept clear. In a country where we typically, let's say, put an air conditioner or a room cooler, and which room cooler or air conditioner juts out into the corridor, it's a very acceptable practice in our country. But most other countries will not, especially the developed countries where the regulatory requirements are much stronger, they will not allow such an obstacle to be on the walking path. So what was projected to us was these obstacles are very dangerous, and they can result in upper body injuries, and people who go through have these injuries more than once, they would actually lose their confidence to be able to even walk independently. So that's an impact that it could have, and it's very important that we can address this problem, and that is the first problem that we took up for addressing. The solution, I'm sure many of you would be familiar with this solution, even though they may not be using it, but at least you may be aware that we did create this. This is a very simple device which we call a smart cane, which provides, primarily is an ultrasonic ranging device, works for around 3 meters. We do have a mechanism to reduce it to 1.8 meters when you are walking indoors, so that the range gets limited, because 3 meters is too large a range for when you're walking inside. Initial reaction for us, let's say, the design was that we can provide an audio output which can read out the distance, but we were clearly told that the synthetic sound coming continuously is very irritating and can be very disturbing, because the sound that comes from the surrounding when one is outside is extremely important for the safety of a blind person. So then we adopted the vibratory patterns as a method of conveying the obstacle, presence of obstacle, as well as the distance of the obstacle. The way the device works is that it vibrates, the handle vibrates, and the vibration patterns are become much more intense as you come closer to the obstacle. It's meant to complement white cane functionality, and typically in all our experience, what we have seen is users who have a reasonable experience as well as efficiency in using white cane are the ones who are able to best benefit from this. To make it cost effective and also to work in Indian circumstances. So in this field now, we've been there for some time, so we understand lots of differences. So the canes that are typically used in US and Canada and Japan, these canes are much more hardy and they don't break easily, but of course they're also extremely expensive. On the other hand, the canes that are available in India are very inexpensive, but they also break much more easily. So it was important to protect the device. So we adopted the strategy of putting this device on the top fold, and it's also very easily detachable. And the other thing is that we had to do a fair amount of work to make a grip which actually will be suitable for people who are already familiar with different grips. People who are already using various grips, we did not want them to have to switch their grips to be able to use the device. Of course, on the electronics and software side, we did do a lot of work on trying to make the device low power. So today the device easily works for 14 to 15 hours after one charge. Typically, we expect 2 to 3 hours of usage per day when a person is walking, and that amounts to around maybe 5 to 6 days for charging. The device, the functionality was designed as a knee-above obstacle detection. But what we are seeing is there's also finding traction for the other use that it can have. It is the non-contact obstacle detection. Because even though certain obstacles which are below the level of knee, let's say, if a stone is there on the road, which is actually can be detected by the cane, that's fine. But if, let's say, if a dog is sleeping on the road, and if the user has to touch the dog to be able to find, it could actually result in dangerous situations. So the non-contact detection, and also in other circumstances when we are interacting or having a social gathering with human beings around, so making a contact all the time could also have an impact in terms of irritation or not a very dignified contact. So it also helps in doing a non-contact detection in those surroundings. So that's the device that we developed, and once it came to a stage, of course it took a long time. First of all, the students who were working on it, they were obviously doing other things, so it took some time for them to do the prototypes. But once the prototypes are ready and we get some amount of feedback from the users that yes, the device has some potential, let us say, use and potential acceptance, then we started looking for funding for what's called translational research. Typically, a device which gets generated in an academic institution requires a lot of changes, which is typically referred to as translational research, which primarily involves how do we manufacture it, how do we make sure that the device is certified. There are lots of issues and optimizations that needs to be done from a user perspective, from the point of your manufacturability, from the cost perspective, maintenance perspective. So all these things become important. And of course, the support material that is required by the users. Designers using a device themselves is easy because they know ins and outs of the device. They know both the strengths and weaknesses. But then you need manuals, you need training programs, and so on. And that took, and all these takes time as well as effort and also cost. So we are very lucky in around 2011, we actually got major funding from Wellcome Trust, which entered India at that time with a program called Affordable Healthcare in India. And we were the first beneficiaries of that. Our proposal was the first proposal accepted under Affordable Healthcare in India, which helped us to refine the product to a level that we could actually go to the users. So this particular slide shows the device and its various, packaging and all the other things by which it gets shipped. Just I have one slide which actually shows that the journey from 2005 to 2014, it's a 9-year journey. But I would effectively say it was a 6-year journey because 3 years were lost in just trying to find a funding, the translational research funding, to take the device out of the lab. But those of you who can see this slide, you can see that from a completely rudimentary device, very large, bulky, not usable, to come to this sleek form by which the users are comfortable and various grips they can hold the device, has been a fairly, a lot of effort that went into it. But some of the important learnings that we have, and when we started working on this, it became very clear that the lab has to be very interdisciplinary in nature. We were very lucky to get another collaborator in this process. Professor P.V. Masudan Rock is today a co-founder of the lab, AssisTech lab. And he provided all the support in terms of the mechanical design, the grip design, because those became much more challenging. The electronics part of it, the software part of it, we could handle. That's the strengths that we had in the computer science engineering department where this work started. And also our students had a lot of proficiency in this particular work. But that was easy, but that became difficult. Later, once we released the device in the market, we now realized that we are not alone in this field. Actually, what had happened was there was a device that was actually available in UK before our project started. The Translational Research funding came, but at that point in time, due to financial reasons or whatever, the device was actually unavailable. So they got some more funding and some maybe an investor came in, and now, so there is a device which is called UltraCane. Except the fact that the way that the UltraCane was designed and the way that it it works, so I think the users have a lot more, the training that is required by the users, because it's not a vibrating handle, it's a vibrating pin. Power-wise, maybe it is more efficient, but the fact that you have to now hold it in a particular grip and touch the pin is our feedback that we have received is not very comfortable. Of course, they have more than one sensor, and which also makes it clear that, so the training that would be required will be much longer. But of course, the most important part of the device, which makes it very unattractive, is its price. At 680 pounds, almost close to $1,000, the device was actually considered unaffordable even in developed high-income countries. But clearly, it had no penetration in countries like India. So they had a very small market, and they were. When we launched the device, and today it's available at around 35 pounds, equivalent of, in India, we are doing it at around 3,500 rupees. And that makes it extremely attractive, and actually no competition exists either in terms of volumes or in terms of usage. But as I go along and talk about the other devices that we are working on, clearly the issue that remains is we had to solve the local problem. In this case, the problem was of nearby obstacle detection, which is actually a very important problem for mobility of visually impaired in countries like India, where the environments are much more unstructured and not that regulated. And second, more importantly, we also make the devices or the solutions really affordable, because at that price, where the users can buy, or even the schemes that the government has will support, because at equivalent of 680 pounds, even the ADIP scheme is never able to support even a few users. Whereas at the price that 3,500 rupees that we are selling this device today, ADIP scheme is supporting a large number of users to have access to this device. Let me switch gears and talk about the other mobility device that we have been working on. And in fact, today there was a Rajya Sabha TV story on this particular device. It will get repeated tomorrow also, and Rajya Sabha TV at 11 o'clock. So those of you want to watch it can see this. But this is a device for visually impaired to access public buses. Apart from walking, the most other affordable transportation in urban centers is the public buses. They are widespread, and they are also essential for being able to go to work, go to school. In many environments, the buses are very essential for commuting. When it comes to access to public buses, so it's a situation which is very weak in our country. Primarily, there are two challenges. One challenge is a global challenge, which is the challenge of finding the route number. If a person was to have an independent mobility and he or she doesn't have to rely on a co-passenger waiting at the bus stop to find whether his or her bus has come, then he has an independent mobility. Because there are a lot of challenges when you are actually asking another person to help you to be able to board the bus. First of all, a person has to exist, so you cannot be in a stop where there are no other people standing, then you will not know. But even we also have heard stories which have, some people playing a prank has informed of the wrong bus. Or even more interesting, a story that came from one of the girls who were testing our device early on, that the person concerned actually wants to cooperate, but after some time, you are not very clear that the person is still around, or he has taken his own bus and left the bus stop. Because obviously, if his own bus comes, he's not going to be waiting there to be able to support you or to inform you when your bus comes. So this was another problem that visually impaired persons are faced when they are asking in a bus stop to continuously check whether the person who actually offered to help is still around. All this means that an independent mobility is important. But the second part, which is even more complicated and which actually is also a reason such a solution has not emerged from outside, is the fact that the buses do not stop in a bay when it comes to Indian cities. And this is clearly not only true of Indian cities, but also true of many countries like in Southeast Asia, in SAARC countries and many other low-income countries where there are a lot of slow-moving traffic which actually is on the bus stop. Crowds are there as well as slow-moving traffic. Also vendors are there, which makes that the buses actually stop not next to the bay, but sometimes quite far from it. Our own estimates show that 20 to 25 meters is the distance that the user may have to travel to be able to actually go and locate the entry door of the bus. And this part of locating the entry door is a big challenge. And again, a challenge which is very peculiar to ours. And we needed a solution. And of course, again, this problem was posed to us not by us, but by visually impaired users, that we find as technology solutions for it. So I have another slide which shows a bus cleanly stopping in a bay in, I think it's in Singapore. So, which is clearly not the way that the system works. Yeah. So we developed a solution, and this solution was also developed for a long time, but it did not go out and we did not refine it because we focused on getting our first device, SmartCane, out. And only then we started working on this device to be, there was bandwidth issues, there are funding issues. But basically it works on a principle that we have RF transponder system. So the user carries a small RF device. On the bus, there is another RF device. User can query. The user hears the bus coming, approaching. More than one bus could be approaching. And the user device has just two simple buttons, one for query, another for select. Presses the query button. All the buses in the vicinity respond with their route numbers in RF. This device can collect all the responses and read out one by one locally on the device. We implement a small slotted network protocol because the buses could be responding and there could be collision, there could be number of buses. And so if there's a collision, so it gets an acknowledgement that the user's device has heard, otherwise it again sends the query back again. It sends the not query, so it sends the route number again to the transmits on the RF. So it's a simple slotted network protocol that's implemented, and our calculations show that one will be able to handle around 7 to 8 buses, which simultaneously approach the bus stop. And that's a fairly large number. And if the user finds that one of the routes is of interest to the user, then he can press the select button. And once the select button is pressed, then the bus which has been selected responds, giving an audio cue. The speaker is fitted next to the entry door of the bus. So on that, when it responds, it speaks out, let's say in this particular slide, it speaks out the number 501. And that particular number gives the idea that gives an audio cue for the user to move towards the bus. Please remember, this audio cue is helpful in multiple ways. Not only that the user actually comes to know what's the route number of the, where the entry door of the bus is. So the audio cue helps the user to navigate himself or herself towards the entry door. But he also comes to know whether the bus is still moving, because if the audio cue is moving, that means the bus has not come to a stop, because our transaction starts before the bus actually arrives at the bus stop. And so then it also is helpful for the user to know whether the bus has come to a stop. After we conducted the trials, we realized that there's another thing that this does, which is very interesting, which we did not see from the user perspective, but which is very important from the other stakeholder, which is the bus operator perspective. So when we had conducted a large-scale trials of this device in Mumbai, and then finally these were installed on 25 best buses. And when we went and met the general manager, he informed us that this device is very useful, not only from the point of the user, but also from the point of the company, because we are publicly announcing in some way that a person with special needs is wanting to board the bus. It increases sensitivity. It also puts some public pressure on them for them to wait for this particular user or even help him or her board the bus. And this is something which makes this device extremely interesting, Because how do we build such a compassion or such empathy in the drivers and conductors to be able to support them? And in this case, it actually happens naturally because the bus is actually speaking out aloud the route number, which actually is an indication that somebody with special interest is planning to go. So this is what I'm showing you is an installation that we carried out on the Mumbai buses. So at that point in time, our installation actually had a separate battery because things were under trial and we were not using the bus battery. We were having a separate battery, but we also fitted it on the window next to the seat, which is actually reserved for the people with special needs in the front of the bus. And they are also allowed to board from the front in Mumbai. So actually this particular entry door, which was next to it, was helpful for the users to board and directly take the seat. From the Mumbai trials, which actually almost happened more than a year and a half back. So we have been able to do a lot of work, again through another funding from DST, where we have been now able to miniaturize the user unit considerably. We have been able to miniaturize the bus unit considerably, and also to make it compatible to work with the bus batteries. So we now have a solution which actually is fully ready for large-scale deployment. In fact, the solution that I am now showing you on the slide number 15, has been installed on 9 DMTS buses and other 3 more buses belonging to the blind organizations. And they have been extensively tested both for ruggedness as well as in terms of their effectiveness. Though what we are finding is in Delhi, the number of users who actually use the bus are far fewer, and their also comfort level with using the bus is also smaller, because the buses are much more, in terms of where they stop and in terms of what the general, let us say, situation that exists in the bus stop is not all that conducive for even for people who are may not be visually impaired but who may be older and so on. Whereas in Mumbai we saw a lot more users who are actually bus users, because these trials we are essentially conducting with bus users just to be not to have any safety risk because of the device. And so we find that though the device is getting ready, but in terms of in places like Delhi or places where these buses are, let's say the discipline levels, even all among the crowd as well as the bus operators is lower, it is going to be a bigger challenge in operation of the device. Let me again switch gears and now talk a little bit about the work that we have been doing in the space of education. So many of this webinar listeners would already be familiar with Braille. So, there's not something that I need to talk about, but the issue is Braille is, of course, quite widely popular among the blind. Also, there are a lot of blind schools. Of course, with more schools becoming inclusive, that's going to be a challenge, because the teachers also don't know Braille and they may not have any training in Braille. But the challenge is in terms of tactile diagrams. How do they visually impaired access pictures? And this particular problem we faced because we were trying to make a self-learning manual for our smart cane. And we wanted to explain the principle of ultrasonic ranging. And the team that was working on it had a big struggle, because when they went to number of blind schools, which are actually considered to be well equipped, so they also did not have any mechanism to make these tactile diagrams, or the mechanism that were there were rather primitive. And then this idea came that why don't we look at the production of tactile diagrams itself? Because we realized that the books that were being given in India to the blind students were actually only containing Braille, only the text, because of the large number of Braille presses government had established, which are producing Braille pages at a reasonable cost. The Braille text was available, but no diagrams were available. This was in sharp contrast to the type of material that we saw in UK and US, where there are a lot of tactile diagrams, textbooks, and everything was available. Almost anything that a sighted child could read in terms of textbooks, a similar textbook was available for a visually impaired with all the tactile diagrams. So this gap was very large. And then we also realized that the technology that they used for production of these tactile diagrams are so expensive, because a lot of material is produced using swell paper, which actually costs almost $2 per page. That this cost was one of the reasons that tactile diagrams did not enter the Indian market. Of course, this is a series on STEM, so you all understand the need for diagrams, maps, bar graphs, science diagrams, and so on and so forth. All of them are extremely essential if one has to actually pursue science education. The diagrams play a very critical role. Economics, science, mathematics, geometry, for example. In all of this, if the visually impaired have to have access to this, they need tactile diagrams. So we started working on the production of the tactile diagrams. We looked at the technology end to end. By this time, our team had become very interdisciplinary. We were no longer group of people who were only looking at electronics and software, but we were also looking at mechanical engineering, we were also looking at design. So then it was easy for us to put in a team which was a very interdisciplinary team. And we are fortunate that we got funding for Center of Excellence in Tactile Graphics from MITI, which is the Ministry of Information Technology. We sent a proposal to them and we are pretty quickly we got funding for it. And the whole idea was that we will do everything from software to designers to the process of production of tactile diagrams. We look at it and try to solve the problem end to end for affordable tactile diagrams. So today, I'm very happy to share with you that we have been successful in doing that. We have produced a large number of tactile books, working very closely with NCERT. And also we have produced books for other users, and we have also mastered the whole technology. So it's not rocket science, it's fairly straightforward. So the software part of it is still, we have a first version of a software which is able to follow guidelines. So there is guidelines like BANA and so on. These guidelines define how the diagram has to get simplified or how the labeling has to be done. So many things it talks about so that one can take a diagram which is made for the sighted and make it useful for the visually impaired. So we are now a set of designers who understand these guidelines and can use tools like CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator to simplify a diagram made for the sighted and create a diagram for the and then 3D printing has become very widespread. So we are using 3D printing to make the molds and then using the thermoforming technique. In this process, we also developed a high-speed thermoforming machine because presently all the thermoforming that was happening was manual, which was not good when you want to produce a large number of copies and with some repeatable in terms of quality. The software part also now, very simple diagrams. Today we have a software which can actually do the simplification on the fly. It can take a diagram. Of course, it does still requires a lot of improvements for handling complex diagrams. For very simple diagrams, it's able to do that. And we have been doing this work now in the lab and we have produced a large number of books, but clearly IIT cannot start production of these books. So what we have essentially now done is we have been able to incubate a company called Race Lines Foundation, which is a non-profit Section 8 company and is now accepted under the TBIU program of IIT Delhi, the Technology Business Incubation Unit program. And it will start soon operating, maybe starting early next month, it will soon operating from Sonipat complex. And it will be in the process of clearly scaling up and production of the books. Again, to show you the cost differential. So with American Printing House, with which we have been talking for other things and have been visiting them regularly. So we found out that their price for a production of a page works out to be almost $2. Whereas what we are today doing it is around 25 cents, but we are very hopeful that within a year's time or year and a half time, we'll be able to reduce it to 15 cents or so. One of the challenges is that still we are importing the sheets, the thermoforming sheets. Though they are not too expensive, but still they are expensive and being just plastic sheets. So it should be possible if we can actually locally source them. We are looking at all possible options of sourcing this within India, and then we will be able to do a substantial reduction of cost of these diagrams. Let me come to the last topic that I want to talk about in terms of access to digital text. Of course, access to digital text for the visually impaired is not very difficult because people can use screen readers. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with screen readers and are using them in your day-to-day, both work as well as education. But Braille has its own role. So it is very clear that a lot of studies have shown that it is important that especially when the person starts reading and writing, he has to get familiar with Braille and he has to because the writing part of it becomes difficult unless somebody has a good familiarity with Braille. The reading and writing are complementary skills. So refreshable Braille displays are devices which actually have these pins which pop up and down and create Braille characters. And it's like a line display, and a person can touch it and read line by line. These again devices have been around for a very long time. It's almost 3 decades that these electronic refreshable Braille displays have been around, except that their cost has been prohibitive and there hardly any penetration in countries like India. So we took up the challenge almost 5 years back, maybe more than 5, almost 6 years back, of trying to create a Braille display which is inexpensive. So we realized that one of the key things is the key technology of Braille cells, because the Braille cells, which are piezoelectric actuator based cells, which everybody was using, was highly proprietary item. There are very few manufacturers, 2 manufacturers, one in Japan, one in Germany, make the cells, and people buy these cells and make devices. So many companies that actually make devices buying these cells. This being a completely proprietary and patented technology was extremely expensive. The cost of each cell was working out to be $25 to $40 per cell. And that makes that a device which is actually made out of it is going to be very expensive. So we started working on the core technology. So rather than using piezoelectric actuators, we started designing these cells using what's called shape memory alloys. And these alloys have a property by which you can make an actuator. You pass a current, it heats up, and then it shrinks by the temperature rise. So it operates within a certain temperature range. And in that heating and cooling, you can actually make an actuator. And these actuators have been used for many other applications, but now we use them for making the refreshable Braille cells. And what you are seeing now on the slide 21 is prototypes of a 20-cell device and a 40-cell device that we have developed in the lab. So we have been able to do both. We have been able to cut down the cost of these devices extremely, at least by 6 times from what the devices that are available in the market. But we also have making these devices to be very high featured. So they actually compete with devices which are very expensive today, primarily because we have all the software, and these devices can be used not only for reading Braille, but they can also be used for surfing the web, emailing, document preparation. So I would say like a laptop, not a high-end laptop, but let's say whatever is the early laptops that one could do, they could do almost everything using these devices. So they are standalone, and they can, of course, they connect with Wi-Fi as well as with Bluetooth with other devices that one may have. You can connect to a desktop or a laptop, and you can transfer files and things like that. So these 2 prototypes, what you are seeing, are now ready, and the present stage is that user focus group trials have happened, and now they are being produced in some volume so that we can go and do large-scale trials. So that is the status that we have. Okay. And again, this particular slide shows that something which costs $2,500, we want to bring it down to $600, equivalent of $600, and to reduce the price by at least 4x. In case of the higher-end device, we are looking at something like 6x reduction in prices, which we think will be instrumental in taking it to a much larger number of users within countries like India and other low-income countries. So this is what I wanted to talk about the device, but I will also like to share with you that the challenges that we faced in reaching where we are. When we actually first launched the Smart Cane on 31st March 2014, that was the time when the Disability Commissioner of India, we invited him in a function in the seminar hall at IIT Delhi, and he launched the Smart Cane for public. And another, by October, November, we were into volume production. So our technology partner, our production partner, Phoenix Medical Systems, was capable of then producing large number of them by the month of October. And then, next year we got enlisted in ADIP, and ADIP started giving large volume demand. And then, of course, other users also picked up. Other organizations also started ordering devices from us. But one of the challenges we found, and this is a situation which is very different in countries like India, at least in India, and countries in outside, let's say UK or US. So if you go to American Printing House, they actually have an address of every blind student in US who is actually attending school, and for which they have to supply support in terms of material. So that's the level of organization and documentation that exists to be able to reach out. Similar thing at we found in RNIB, they have access to information for almost every visually impaired person within UK. So they are able to reach them, they are able to send them newsletters, they are able to give them updates on what they are doing and whether the solutions. Most of the challenges, though we have this large number, 5 million people who are visually impaired and spread, of course, all over our continent-like size country. But the challenge is they are all attached to, if they have any, first of all, a large number who are perhaps in small towns and villages, they don't even in touch with any organization. Even if they are in touch with organization in cities as well as in other towns, where there may be organizations which work in this space, each of these organizations are very small and they serve the needs of very small number of visually impaired who live in that locality. There are thousands of such organizations which exist in this country. So it was very hard to, if you have a technology, if you have a solution which can actually help a person, how do you reach them itself is a big challenge. In our case, we did this very seriously. We actually tried to create channel partners. Today, we have almost 40 plus channel partners across India. We don't have any in Northeast, but outside of that, we have most of the states in India covered with one or more than one channel partner who actually is aware of a device. They have people who are trained to be able to, trainers who are trained and special educators who are trained and who can actually train the users on the use of this device. So that is that's the effort that I put in, and of course this particular creation of these channel partners across the country has helping us also in dissemination of other products. But I think we still have to go a long way of creating an ecosystem by which people can be reached, and that's going to be a big challenge as we go and make assistive technology, more and more assistive technology available to the people. I will now try to summarize the work that we have done. So I talked about SmartCane, and I want to give you a status of where we are. So we are around 50,000 devices that have been sold in India, and 700 devices have gone out to the country to 12 different countries. So this year we are also hoping to do a launch in US, and we are working with trying to identify partners or organizations which will be able to do that. In case of onboard, we have done pilot testing on 25 best buses, and we are doing this testing on 15 DMTS buses. Here we are really struggling to get a donor who would actually do a citywide installation. The challenge till now is, though we have very good results in Mumbai, for example, 94% of the time we did more than 350 unsupervised boardings, and they were able to board the first bus on the route. And this we found by asking them to note down what time they reached the bus stop and what time they caught the bus. And if it was less than the frequency of the bus, then we assumed that they got the first bus on the route. But the challenge is that this is all synthetic in the sense that all these users were doing this as trials. How effective it is when people are going to work, people are going for their schools, or they use it in a normal day-to-day setting, their use setting. And this requires that we need installation on a large number of buses, because on one route or one timing, it's not possible that large number of users we can find. So, and of course, finally, we want to go towards regulation, making it a regulatory requirement for all buses to have such device so that they are become accessible. Just like for accessibility, they talk about low floor buses for accessible for wheelchairs as well as for older people. Similarly, like ramps for buildings. Similarly, we are very clear that finally it will happen through regulatory requirement. But to be able to reach that regulatory or make a proposal to the regulators, we want to be clear in terms of its effectiveness by actually installing it at one citywide installation. So today we are looking at 1,000 buses and 1,000 users to be given this device over a period of 6 to 9 months to be able to get enough evidence to then go for regulation. In case of tactile diagrams, so we, as I said, we have produced many NCRT books, and now we have incubated this Race Lines Foundation. In case of refreshable Braille displays, focus group trials are now almost complete, and now we are going in for large scale some volume production. I won't say large scale, 20 to 30 pieces, and then go for pilot testing among a large number of users. We are hopeful by end of this year, we'll be able to launch this as a product in the market. In my talk, I already mentioned Mr. Dipendra Manocha, so I'm mentioning the key collaborators, and I'm very grateful to all of these people who have done wonderful. We've been able to collaborate extremely well to be able to do what we have been able to do. Dipendra Manocha has always been, sort of working with us, projecting the requirements, and also helping us to network with the relevant people who are in the field, giving us solutions, giving us partnerships, and helping us in multiple ways. Professor Masudan Rao, who is a designer, also leads the innovation activity, has always been with us in terms of both mechanical design and all those inputs that are required for making any of these products successful. Rohan has one early student and who was extremely dedicated to this particular, committed to the work. So he was involved in the Smart Cane project, but it was not just the involvement in terms of a student, but he went much beyond that. He was always available to us. Even after he graduated, he was working on the project. Then he came and spent a year with us as a postdoc to make sure that the product reaches the users. Piyush is somebody who is the lab manager right now and extremely committed, and is very clear that his life is going to be working in this space. So which is very rare for people at that age to think that yes, they would like to make a difference by making a career of both finding solutions, doing dissemination, doing whatever it takes to be able to go to the users. This is a picture of taken some time back. It's not a very new picture. So of course, the group, a lot of group members have changed, but they also saw a lot of group members who have continued with us. And we have a group, at any point in time, we have 20 plus research staff who are working on various projects. And we have maybe 25 to 30 students who are involved with us in various ways throughout the year. I would now like to at least stop and then maybe have some discussions. So we call our lab AssisTech, and we live with a dream, and the dream is to be able to touch 1 million lives by 2022. That is the way that we look at AssisTech. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bala, for introducing us with the AssisTech Lab and with various efforts which we are taking at the AssisTech Lab for making the mobility and education accessible. Now we are open for the Q&A. Everyone can use the chat box for asking the questions.
People may also like just unmute themselves if that's easier. There's an option to unmute yourself there. Unmute my audio. We didn't hear your question.
Hi, Supriya here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this question for Professor Bala. Thank you very much for this presentation. I think it was very insightful. I did visit AssisTech Lab a few months back, and I have seen all these devices and mighty impressed with the team as well. I had a few questions. So the first question was regarding the public bus access system. After I and also connected with the BMTC organization, with Professor Rajgopalan, who basically heads the technology arm of that organization. So I wanted to know if we could do a trial run here in Bangalore.
Yeah, it is possible. Yes, we can do a trial run. So, so the issue is that just one thing is a small scale trial. I'm not sure how much more data we can get, because we can share the small scale trials that we have done with 15, 20 buses, 25 buses in Mumbai, 10 buses earlier in Delhi, and now with 15 buses, which may go up to 20 if they permit us to put on more buses. But now, presently, what we are really looking at is the large-scale trials. So something where we are not bringing people for trials, but they actually take it for the regular use. And this will happen only if it is installed on a large number of buses to get enough evidence. The issue is that bus companies typically are loss-making companies, and they tell us that they will not be able to fund us, but they are ready to install it and make it available to the users. That way, they are ready to collaborate. But we still need to get funding source to be able to manufacture enough of these devices and install them and run the trials. So we have a proposal I can share with you, and if you can get good funding, either through CSR or through any other means, if we can get, I'm not sure whether the bus company themselves would be ready to fund. We are ready to do it in any city as long as we can get this funding to be able to do a large scale trial. The small scale trials.
So what might be the cost of this device? What might be the cost of this device?
See, the cost of the device in mass production, we expect that the user device will be less than 500 rupees and the bus device will be less than 5,000 rupees in mass production. Okay, so, and of course, running the trials and so on. So, we have a projected cost of 1,000 users, 1,000 buses. Of course, we can scale it down if that number is not possible. 9 months, 3 months for production and installation, and 6 months of trial. So the total cost works out to be around 2.2 crores. This is to install it for 1,000 buses, 1,000 users, and over trials over 9 months. We have an industry partner, and if any of these costs can be borne by a local agency, then this cost can come down. Because like Bombay, for example, XRCBC has said that they can recruit the volunteers. So we don't, so some cost comes down because of that. Or if somebody wants to, if our manufacturing partner is only to supply the devices and somebody else is to conduct the trials, then the cost can significantly come down because then they don't have to employ their people. But this is the overall cost, assuming that the trials have to be conducted by industry.
Okay, thank you. So I can actually probably, so Professor Rajgopalan was asking initially when I had introduced this idea, and so maybe I'll discuss with him and we can write to you jointly. He can write.
Yeah, I can share. The proposals are ready. We are also now sending it to many CSR, people who may be interested in doing this as CSR.
Okay.
Okay. Once these trials are over, we plan to go for regulation. We will be able to say that we are successfully.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, so I had another question. Can I go ahead, Karthik? Is that okay?
Yeah, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So the other question that I had was regarding digital text. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, I am here.
Yeah, okay, sir. So I just want to know regarding for the refreshable braille display that you're working on. So right now, from what it seems to us is that the cost would be somewhere around 50,000 rupees for the 40 cell display, right?
40 cell with 30 keyboard will be between 50 and 60,000. And for the 20 cell will be between 30 and 35,000.
Yeah. So our experience in the field. So we have been in this. So I represent Vision Empire. I don't know if you know about us. We are incubated at IIT Bangalore. So we are also trying to help in the ecosystem in our own small way. So wherever we find technologies which might be of use to the students, we're basically working on STEM education. So we would like to take these to the schools. So I did speak to Piyush regarding this device. The thing is that affording at this cost, even at 30 to 35,000 per child, is kind of out of reach for 70% of the students in the schools that we are addressing. So I wanted to know if there is any plan of any further technologies to make it more affordable.
No, we are working on it. I think, it will take time. First, there has been a lot of challenges, technical challenges to get the shape based cells. So I have a feeling that we may be able to do another reduction, but that may happen only after a year and a half. See, at the time when we started, there were no low-cost, affordable braille displays. Today, there are actually, if you look into it, we have competitors in the market. People have also made braille displays which are affordable. And there is a company that has come from IIT Bombay called BrailleMe. They also have displays that have come. Orbit is another company which has also started making low cost. Of course, their features are less. They don't have so much of software and they are not standalone devices. That way, our device is much better. But in terms of as a braille display, I think they also are giving very affordable displays. This did not exist when we started. So at that time, we were, but at the same time when we started, I think many others also started because this came from this initiative from the Global World Blind Unions on called Transforming Braille, where they realized that people do not read Braille, then they will have problems in terms of vocation, jobs, retaining jobs. So there is a fair amount of competition also in this field, which is good because which will also bring the best in terms of what the prices that we can go. But at this point, we are not in a position to say. But if volumes increase and we are able to do more optimizations, we should be able to bring down the cost. But I think it's at least a year and a half to away, and we can talk of a lower price.
Okay, so in this one, for the from what I know of the technology that's being used from the software side, the LibLouis driver, which is used for working on apps and other applications on the device, is there already support for local languages?
Our device will be released with support for English and Hindi. But it should be not too difficult to create support for. We are building a lot of it on open source, so we are hoping that our partners will be able to create local languages. That's the strategy we took in case of SmartKin also. Many of our translations have been done by other organizations because in terms of the manuals and things like the language manuals. Because for us to do other languages is hard because unless your team has good people who are experienced, we can't do the testing and other things. But our strategy will be that it should actually be able to work in other languages. That's how we will.
Okay, so as Vision Empire, I'd like to reach out to you because we want to have a team which would then work on the local languages, South Indian local languages. So if we can reach out to you and then we can continue this discussion offline.
Absolutely, we can do that. And you should also consider, if you're talking of STEM education, you should also consider the tactile diagrams because that will now be able to supply very quickly because this company is allowed.
So we are already in discussion with Piyush and we have already procured some and we will procure more of those.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, anyone else? Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other queries?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Sonal I'm calling from USA. And I really love the idea of this tactile diagram because, and I have a question for Professor Bala, have you considered using this laser engraving? Now in USA, that has become, after the 3D printing, that has become pretty popular, and the printers are also not that expensive, and it can engrave on wooden blocks. And I just wanted to ask because I recently saw it working, and first thing I thought about was can this be useful for people who cannot see, this kind of diagram production?
Okay, so we are using 3D printing only to make the mold. Yes, we can also make the mold using laser engraving. It is possible.
Okay.
We have tried, but presently the cost of the, these molds also, the cost of the mold is also important. Unless you do a very large number of copies, the mold cost is to be distributed onto the actual diagram cost. So here what we do is we take a very simple sheet of paper, we use very little of even the mold material, because we only do the diagram in terms of what the outline of the diagram is on the 3D printing and paste it on the paper, which becomes the mold. Okay, so it's a very low cost thing. So laser engraving, of course, is very good, very accurate also, and it can be definitely be used. And we have done some samples with it, but we still don't know how to make it cost effective, because the base material becomes more expensive.
Okay, thank you. Because the base material that I saw was the thin pieces of just plain wood, just like plywood or something.
No, but please, you have to understand what our process is. Once we make the mold, we are using the thermoforming.
Okay.
So this paper and this, the plastic sheet, this Braille sheet, and the mold goes into the thermoforming machine, and it gets formed.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the copies do not have any 3D printing. Only the mold has 3D printing. That's how it works. So the wooden block cannot be so thin that it can actually go into the.
Okay.
Of course, it has uses. We are looking at some use for it, but it is not directly for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other?
I have a question. This is Venkatesh. Am I audible?
Yes. Yes, Venkatesh.
Yes. So, Professor Bala, this is regarding the onboard bus system that you've talked about, right? So, my question was the choice. I mean, is there any specific reason why RF was used as opposed to, a smartphone-based thing or a mobile-based solution?
We have a solution, mobile-based solution today. So
Okay.
we put Bluetooth, and we do have a solution, so we can also do, but we are getting very low range there.
Okay.
The standard mobile solution, Bluetooth, is not giving adequate range. There is not enough time for a person to location.
Okay. I mean, yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
In a friendly environment, it will work. In the sense, if the bus is going to come and stop at the bay that is clear, then you don't need this device. Mobile will go. But if you have to sort of find the, start engaging with the bus even before it reaches the stop at 50 meters or so, then mobile solution.
Right. Okay.
4 meters it's able to.
Yeah. So even GPS was not really helpful, I suppose, then, because the idea of the speaker was, I really like the idea that the bus itself will start alerting.
So that is enough. Now the buses have started having GPS, so we can integrate them. They still are not using open systems; those are closed systems, and we are not using. But I think it's early days for GPS and all buses in India. They started, but
right. So I had one more question regarding the same with respect to user trials that you've performed. So how do you generally gather data when you're doing a trial in an open environment, right? I mean, my understanding is, you can correct me, is that you've done trials with people who are used buses on their regular routine and handing them these devices. So how would you, I mean, what are the challenges that would be in doing a trial in an open environment?
That's a big challenge. Other things are fine, if you have to do Braille Display, tactile, these are much, and even smart game because a walking thing. The bus is a challenge, especially, so we do three things. We do what's called supervised, semi-supervised, and unsupervised. We go through 3 stages. The supervised is somebody accompanies the person and actually virtually holds him when he's boarding the bus.
Yes.
Only thing is he's using the device. The visually impaired person is using the device, but there is a person next to him all the time.
Right.
In the semi-supervised, what we do is the other person is present and intervenes only if he said the situation requires intervention.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the semi-supervised. Unsupervised is when the person has to do it by himself. For the unsupervised part, we only use the existing bus user.
Yeah.
Okay, we do not use the people who are not confident of themselves using the bus because of the fact that if there is an accident, people will think that it's because of the device.
Yes. And how was the data collection process? Like, did you guys have some telemetry in the system, or was it based on the time?
Lot of video recording when they're supervised or semi-supervised. There's a lot of video recording happening, and also in the unsupervised, and that was the best, let us say, most effective part of it was in Mumbai. We did 350 unsupervised boardings.
Okay.
And in the unsupervised boardings, the user was expected to record two things: the time he or she reached the stop and the time he boarded the bus.
Okay.
He had to only report these two things. And he was asked that you go to this particular bus stop, board a bus and get down at this, and then you can go home or wherever you want.
Yes, got it.
And 2 times, and in the evening, somebody would call him up and get both the times that he has recorded and note it.
Right.
This was the process followed in. And then looking at the frequency of the bus, we decided whether he was able to board the first bus or not able to.
Yes. Got it. Thank you so much.
Maybe we can have one or two more questions if someone has it.
If no one
Yes, I have it.
then I have a comment. I really liked all your slides, but I have one curious question, especially you showed all the slides about people using this device in India, and it was striking to me that all the slides had male members. So do you think not many female will really be willing to use these devices in India, especially in Mumbai and Bangalore, and have you thought about this? How will you encourage?
Now, Smart Cane has a lot of women users. We also have videos on the YouTube. I can post on Smart Cane. Bus ID was a challenge. On board, even among the for the men or anything, there was a challenge to get enough people to use the bus. Supervised boardings, we did use women volunteers in Mumbai as well as in Delhi. Mumbai more than Delhi, because they all came through certain organizations, and we left it to the recruitment of the volunteers was left to the partner like XRCBC Mumbai as well as. We gave the broad thing. But for example, now our trials that are happening on refreshable Braille display, there are a lot of it. Okay, because when we are going to a blind school, and we also have access to a blind women's hostel close to IIT, they also sometimes come over and we do have. And some of our very smart users of tactile diagram are young girls.
Thank you.
So there is a fair amount of, okay, if my slides didn't have it, I must apologize for it. I think I would include. So we do have reasonable, except in bus device. Yes, on board we have very few women, especially unsupervised boarding we don't have.
Thank you.
Okay, any last question if anyone has?
I would like to go on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Abhisar here. Bala sir, I would like to ask, this is regarding the our smart cane. I just wanted to ask if there is a possibility, or like, I want your opinions over this. If there is a possibility that we can improvise the cane, like, is there a possibility that we can integrate a camera device kind of thing, which can also give me kind of computer vision feedback? Like, let's just say I am traveling somewhere and I am encountering some obstacle, but I just don't know what it is. And if I can use that camera to take a picture or whatever, just to get to know if there is a person, or if there is a wall, or if there is a tree. So can this be possible?
It's very much possible. Actually, we have a prototype of a device like this. We call it MAVI, Mobility Assistant for Visually Impaired. Uh, one of the challenges, so those are not part of the slide, because what I put over here are things that have reached a certain stage. Okay. Those are
Mhm.
still, I would say, at the research level. There is also a
Okay.
fair amount of work going on in object identification. And so let me tell you what the challenge is.
Mhm.
There are two major challenges. One is, can we get this response fast enough? That is one challenge. Second,
Right.
amount of information that gets generated is so much. How do we convey the information without overloading?
Mhm.
Because see, the difference is the bandwidth of vision is very high. Any image you see, you can absorb a lot of things in a very quick period of time.
Right.
Whether you do it through audio or tactile or through
Mhm.
vibrations, the
Mhm.
bandwidth is very low in terms of being able to convey. So these are
Mhm.
the two challenges. So we already are working on, for example, we have this project going on called MAVI, Mobility Assistant for Visually Impaired. There, what we do
Okay.
is we take a video stream and parallelly process through four streams, four different. One of them is signboard identification and
Mhm.
OCR, which actually
Mhm.
can read hand-painted signboards, which are common in India and which are multilingual signboards. It can
Right.
handle signboards in English and Hindi in the campus. Then there is this another stream which we process to actually identify dogs and cows, which could be
Mhm.
found on streets in India, and that could be a danger in terms of we don't want to put them in space. And the third one is which identifies the texture, in
Mhm.
terms of it can find undulations and things like that, potholes and things like that. That is the third stream. And the fourth stream is based.
Right.
Today we are able to achieve on a device with two microcontrollers, and the mobile is being used to give the feedback. So
Okay.
this is a solution which we have the prototype. We demonstrated it in the open house on the third week of April. But it is very
Mhm.
far from anything I would call as a usable device. Okay. It is, I would say, still at a research stage. We are looking
Mhm.
at maybe in 2 years' time, we will have some solution which will be able to address what we have used. That is what I'm saying.
Nice. Nice. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank thank you.
I had a quick question, Akash.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
one last one, really quick one. This is to follow up on Abhisar's question. This is Karthik Bala sir. Have you explored, like, for example, a lot of the wearable AR technology that's coming up, Oculus, HoloLens, and a bunch of those, in terms of like helping out with, especially the latencies around like getting that feedback from computer vision, for example. Um, what do you think about the potential of those devices potentially coming into the picture? And then the second part is like, on the point of like overload. Do you think it does make sense to the point where we don't really understand that we can make the most useful information? Does it make sense to perhaps at least rely on human beings, so almost like crowdsourcing that, yet they can see the feed, um, pretty much like see what the person is quote unquote seeing, and providing and answering questions that the user might have?
Uh, One issue is, in the real time, you cannot expect that one person is walking and there is another person who is going to be watching. That will not happen.
Mhm.
AI technology solutions are coming, which are very good. We also the Mavi part I talked about, we are also using alternate to doing processing ourselves to doing processing in the cloud. Because similar questions of whether there is a dog in the view, whether there is a signboard and OCR, these things are also being provided by cloud solutions from Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. So we are also trying that out. So the challenge is conveying is still a challenge, in the sense that we are basically saying that anything which is dangerous is in the push mode, everything is in the pull mode. That means only when the user feels that he needs more information, he will pull the information. We will create the surrounding information into and know the surroundings, but not really keep on talking about it till the user actually wants to find out. This is the broad approach we are saying. We also had started some work on other sensors that can be used. Maybe something like a vibrating armband and things like that. That also some very preliminary work we have started with the display. I think there's a lot of potential. I see that this area is going to really create solutions in the next 2 to 4 years. We will see a lot of solutions.
Yeah, because one of the things that I've noticed here is there's this company called IRA, for example, that does essentially this. So they have like a wearable, which is just like Google Glasses, and they can provide like feedback to you, and they have like specialized trained agents. And what people have been able to do with things are things like hiking, for example, with just the agent. I mean, granted that a lot of these people are very independent themselves and are really, really good with O&M. But like the biggest impediment there again is the cost. Like they pretty much have like $100 price tag on their monthly subscriptions, and I'm not sure if the technology is such which kind of leads to that cost, or whether there are even like cheaper alternatives that could pretty much give the same performance. So that might be an interesting thing to.
But there is somebody who is actually watching what you are saying is.
Right.
So then the cost of the person who is watching becomes expensive.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
Okay, I think now we should close it. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, especially Professor Bala, for briefing us on the AssisTech and bringing out various efforts which we are taking at the AssisTech lab. This webinar can be listened again. It will be retelecasted on Radio Udan tomorrow at 9 p.m. We will love if you will join us on 30th of June for the next webinar of the series, in which we'll have some other guest who will brief us on some other research. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.